Okay, so this is part 8 on making an Old West holster. Last time I started chiseling my ends, or my slits here. Finished that off camera, got most of the sewing done, so I'm going to do a few more stitches here and then I'll show you how to end off your thread. Start out with about an arm's length of thread here. Now right now I'm going into a spot I've already stitched, and that's what we want to do. I'm going to run my needle back through, so this one spot's been back stitched twice. And I'm just going to pull it tight and pull my needle off. This side, same thing, pull the needle off. I'm going to cut those ends off and leave between a half and a quarter inch, about 3/8 of an inch of thread poking out. I'm just going to burn that off. Get down, just push it in with my finger. So that's what we got right now. This is the side that you'd see. So it's just one piece of thread that I sewed all the way around and then went back like that on both of them. So now be ready to put it in here, put it through my slits, work that in till it's where I like it. Move the camera to another spot now. Oops. Sorry about that. Okay, put that where I want it. That's about right there. Okay. I'm going to take my rotary punch. I got it on the biggest hole. I'm going to stick it inside that holster. I'm going to punch a hole in that. Okay. Now, poke through that. Make a mark in my skirt. Okay. Now this is lace that I cut out of a piece of chrome tan water buffalo. I'm going to take this and I'm going to cut off a tapered edge. Something like that. I'm going to do that on both ends. That just helps you feed it through those holes easier. Okay. Now, come up through the skirt. One. Put that through there. Pull them through. This is the part that's a little harder. I gotta grab a pliers. Actually went through a lot easier than I thought it would, going off of past experience doing this sort of thing. Okay, pull that through, and we're going to take it and loop it back through itself. just like that. Now when you pull the gun out and hold the skirt, and it'll not slide out of there. That secured it. Okay, now this holster, my retainer thong for going around the hammer, is just about perfect where I wanted it. So I'm gonna put that in the same place. But first, put some Tokonol on this to slick it up and help the fibers kind of stay together. And I just like the looks of it. It darkens it a little, makes it look a little tougher. Run my canvas over it a few times. Kind of weld those fibers together. Okay. Now, take my rotary punch. I'm going to go to the second to the biggest for this, because I want this to be a little bit tighter, and it's a little smaller lace anyway. And that other one goes down in a little ways. It's about an inch from the top. So I'm going to make a mark with my ruler. Okay. Now, pull that out just a little. Below that, about a ½ inch or so, or however far you can get it, just straight below it. Punch out that hole. Okay. Now we're going to want to come in from the outside right here. And this is the hardest part. Trying to feed that through that hole. Can help it along a little. Came out, I had it, but it came out when I moved my finger. Gotcha. Okay. Now we just gotta do that again. Okay, so far so good. Yeah, I can use my pliers. This is one of the hardest things to maneuver. It's hard to see in there. There's easier ways of adding this, but I've said in the other videos, I'm going for historical accuracy here. And from what I can find, this isn't a subject that's been written about very good. This is the way they did it. If you only knew where you'd want this ahead of time, it'd be a lot easier. But if it's the first time you're making it, you're probably not. Okay. So for all intents and purposes, this thing is done, but we still gotta slick up our edges, wet form it, and dye it. So I'll show you a little bit of slicking up edges here. I'm gonna have to take this back apart now is the only bad thing, but do it and leave it in where it's hard to get to. So we've already slicked up the top and the bottom. Now we gotta slick up the edges. I'm gonna sand this down just a little just to even it up. I've used a belt sander on this before too, but I find that it's kind of hard to control how much you're taking off, and sometimes I take off more than I want to. So I'm just gonna, this is where there's 5 plies of leather, so I'm just kind of rounding off some rough edges. Yeah, that looks pretty good. It's pretty well flush. Okay. Now, take some straight water. This water has been in this thing for quite a while. It started as just straight water, but it's had saddle soap and a little bit of dye rub off here and there in it, so that's why it looks different. But it started as just plain water. I'm going to get that edge fairly wet. You can use a sponge for this, but rag doesn't cost me anything. I'd have to buy a sponge. So rub some Fibing saddle soap on that. Just take a piece of canvas. This came off of a military surplus army bag. And I'm just going to rub that until I get a nice slick looking edge. Probably finish that off camera, and then I'm going to do all the edges of the skirt. One other thing that I want to slick up is the inside of these slits. So same deal, I'm going to take some water. I'm going to get the inside of those as good as I can. To go from both sides to get it real good. I'll take my saddle soap, smear that around in there as good as I can get it, which is going to be kind of messy. That's okay though. So we're going to rub it off and wipe it off anyway. Okay, so for getting the inside of that, I'm going to use this tool that came with a leather working kit. Hopefully I can just kind of get it in there and work it. And for the corners, I'm just going to use the cone part. Really, you could use that for the whole thing. I'm just going to kind of slick them up. I hope even them out just a little. I don't know how good I can make these look, being it was a little sloppy to begin with, but I'm going to do my best to make it look a little better. So I'm going to get these slicked up. I'll slick up my perimeter. And then it'll be time to move on to the next step, which be wet forming and then dyeing. If I decide to dip dye it, just soaking it in dye basically, you can wet form to your gun, well, with the dye rather than wetting it with water too. If you're not going to do that, I'd suggest wetting it with the water first and wet forming it and then dyeing it afterwards. Because if you wet form it afterwards, you might get some dye rub off, and it's just better to dye last because that way you can cover up any mistakes you make along the way. So I think that's it for this video. I'm going to finish up what I'm doing here, and I'll catch you guys when I make the next part. Thanks for watching.